Okay, so question one, walk me through a standard pro forma. So the top line starts with potential gross income. And then the line following that is typically less vacancy. Um, and then that leads you to your effective gross income. And then below that, you take out all of your operating expenses. And this can vary depending on the type of lease the tenant has. So if it's triple net, you're going to have very few operating expenses. But if it's not, you can have many, including insurance, salaries, maintenance, taxes, management fees are another one. And so you take all of those and subtract that from your effective gross income, and then you get your net operating income. And then that's a lot of times that's the bottom line, but there's another line. If you take out CapEx, this can be anything from, replacing a roof to, kind of one-time charges on the property. And then that can give you your adjusted net operating income. And then typically below all of that, you'll have your IRR, your net present value, your debt service coverage ratio, and any other type of metrics that might be useful to look at. So question two, primary DCF valuation drivers. So this is kind of linked to the pro forma a little bit that we just talked about. There's a few key ones. First, there's exit cap, and oftentimes this is the make or break rate on a pro forma because it has such a huge impact, and it's basically trying to anticipate the sale price. And if this is off, it can, looking back, your pro forma could have been highly inaccurate if your exit cap was too low, because a lower exit cap gives you a higher sale price. And there's also the assumed discount rate. This will have a huge impact on net present value overall. And as well, there's some other minor ones. There's your assumption for rent growth. And those are typically found in the lease of the property. And that's just to name a few. So question three, how do lenders size mortgages? Well, there's typically three ways. There's three key things that they look at. First of all, this is one of the three, but they look at the size of the loan that someone's asking for. So, let's use a $10 million loan, for example. So the three key metrics they look at are the loan to value ratio. They look at the debt service coverage ratio. And then they look at their debt yield required. So, if they have, an LTV of 65%, that's their, maximum LTV. The most they're going to give out is $6.5 million on the property. And if their debt service coverage ratio is 1.5, they're going to have the net operating income of the property. It's going to have to be spitting off $1.50 for every dollar put in on the property. And then, their debt yield is just, simple as the income divided by the amount of debt provided. So question four, what type of lender would you want to finance your property? I think this depends largely on what type of property you're looking at. But just to briefly go over them, we have banks, and they typically have a lower LTV of around 65%. And then they require a higher debt yield of around 9%. So if you're looking for the best, maximum terms, you might not want to go to a bank for a real estate loan. And then there's agencies. This is, Fannie and Freddie, and they typically, they're just doing housing. So, if you're doing housing, Fannie and Freddie's not a bad place to go because you're going to get a high LTV and a low interest payment requirement. And then there's, insurance. They've got a lower LTV and a higher debt yield requirement. And then you've got commercial mortgage-backed securities, also a higher LTV. So you can get more money from them just like you can with agencies, but their debt yield is also going to be higher. So you're going to end up paying them more. And then you could also go to a debt fund, which works kind of differently. But they typically, they kind of hover around medium LTVs. And then finally, question five, describe a waterfall. So a waterfall is going to have it's going to have the whole capital stack of the project you're looking at, starting with debt. You've got mezzanine, subordinate debt, and those are all going to be the first guys paid off and then that leads you to your preferred equity holders, and then they're paid off, and you've got your other investors, your equity investors all below that, and oftentimes they've all come in at different values, so it gets a little complicated. But ultimately, the point of a waterfall is to basically assign the free cash flows of a company and make sure everyone gets paid in the proper amount in the proper order. And typically you see a 20% hurdle, and then or I'm sorry, like an 8% hurdle, and then profits are split like 20-80 after that among the equity partners. So it can vary, but yeah. Thanks.